Hello everybody, this is Dr. Reyes-Fournier and welcome to Unit 5. In Unit 5 we are going to start getting into the different specializations and subfields of psychology. But before we jump into all the subfields, we get to go into general psychology, and why general psychology is probably one of the more important fields in psychology because it actually cuts through every single other field. Let's see what I found for you today. Actually, no, I don't want that one. I want this one. The APA, actually, Division 1 of APA, which is my favorite, is the General Psychology Division, and according to them, it promotes the creation of coherence among psychology's diverse specialties by encouraging members to incorporate multiple perspectives from psychology's subdisciplines. The idea is that we need to, instead of looking at this as different camps, just looking at them as another way of looking at psychology. Psychology in general is the same throughout all the different fields, that we use the same techniques, we use the same research methods and everything like that. So then where do people, for example, go if their studies aren't strictly one thing or the other? They go to the general psych field. So then we go to the Journal of General Psychology, and I wanted to show you their latest journal and show you what kinds of different articles they have in this journal. This one is what you would look at as a behavioral article. It's also looking at biological things within behavior. In this one, we're talking about the way that you see yourself and revising how you see yourself. I actually like that one. That one sounds cool. General measurement theory, things that all of us in psychology who do research is pertinent to all of us. The history of stress, that's pretty cool. And even this one, this is an IO one, an alternate relationship to unemployment, conceptualizing unemployment. You know, all of these things, if you look at them, they cross many different fields. There's also a Journal of General Psych from Taylor and Francis. I think that there's a few general psych journals. And this is a place for people to publish that, you know, cross boundaries, in other words, because most journals are very specific as to the topic. It's like the Journal of Social Psychology only publishes social psychology topics. So since we're going to jump into all the branches, let's look at what the major branches of psychology are in general. They're split up into things like research and practice. So when we look at things like abnormal psych, we're looking at mental health professionals, clinical psych, counselors, psychotherapists, that work with a myriad of mental health disorders. Behavioral psychology, once again, research, and lots of research. And then you're also looking at ABA people would fit into this, but you see ABA kind of fits into both of these. That's not necessarily a clear, you know, we like to think that there's like this like scalpel that cuts these things, but not really. They're really kind of blunt, that, you know, ABA you know, bridges these two fields. Biopsychology, another way of saying neuropsych, neuroscience, cognitive psychology, physiology, experimental psychology, all of those fit into biopsychology. So that's a lot of different fields, subfields within one field. Clinical psych is actually back up here for abnormal psych, because that's not really a field all by itself. You know, these people just deal with psychiatric disorders, which is what abnormal psych is. Cognitive psychology, once again, we were back up here in biopsych. We talk about cognitive psych. Comparative psychology, this one is, you know, it's more like, I would like to call that evolutionary psych. They used to call it, I'm trying to think, because I took a class on this way back in the day when it was becoming a thing. What did we call it? Biopsychosocial. No. Biopsych? No. What did we call it? sociobiology, that's what we called it. Sociobiological psych, which is evolutionary psych. Studying things like Dawkins and the selfish gene and things like that. Very cool information. Counseling psych, same thing as clinical psych. Different in that counseling psychologists, counselors work with people without severe mental health disorders, and they work with people that have normal life issues like adjustment disorders, things like that, and people who are getting divorced, problems in the family, and that's what they do. So, it's like what would happen if a normal person needed someone to talk to. They would see a counseling psychologist, a counselor, a psychotherapist. All of those work with the same thing. Cross-cultural psychology, mostly these people do research in cultural issues. This is where we border sociology, developmental psychology. Very cool, one of the larger fields of psychology. They do experimental psych, and they work with kids and adolescents. Also, you're going to see in there, you should see gerontology, look at, prenatal development, things like that. All of those would be part of developmental psych. They also would be found things like educational psych. Here's educational psych right here. Educational psych does a lot of developmental psych stuff, so there's like a bridge between those two. And educational psych obviously works in education. School psychologists are educational psychologists. Working with teachers, working with how kids learn. Learning and memory are the biggest fields in here. Actually, what was it? William James, what you would call the father of American psychology, predicted that psychology would play a large role in education. And in fact, education looks the way that it does because of psychology. Don't blame us for all the testing, but I think that everything else is, all the good stuff is from us. Experimental psychology, obviously all the researchers, and that pretty much cuts every single field, every single subfield of psychology. Forensic psychology. This is probably one of what we would consider the newer subfields, because many of us in clinical psych, counseling psych, have worked in forensic psychology for years without ever calling it forensic psychology. Working with the criminal justice system, criminal behavior, treatments, things like that. I worked in prisons on and off throughout my career, so I have an idea about this. Health psychology. Health psychology is also one of the older ones that older subfields in psychology, established by the World Health Organization in the 30s or 40s. And the idea is that our psychological health affects our physical health, and our physical health affects our psychological health. So both of them are affecting each other. So we need to look at health promoting behaviors and avoid health deteriorating behaviors. Okay, industrial organizational psychology. We know what that's about. People who work as psychologists in the business field, working with the industrial part is actually working with ergonomics and things like that, and the human factor, and the organizational part is working with people and how to maximize their work. Personality psychologists, these are researchers primarily, and doing research in the field of personality. School psychology, they're educational psychs. Not much to say there. They do psychometric testing on kids and counseling and all sorts of other things. Social psych, probably one of the largest fields in psychology. Looking at social behavior in groups, and it's interesting, I was just talking to my husband about this, that it's like we go from individual psychology to social psychology. We never really actually get into relationships as much in terms of a subfield, because this is larger groups that we're talking about things like conformity, prejudice, social influence. We're looking at how we behave in groups, things like Lord of the Flies kind of talk. Really cool part of psychology, probably one of my favorites. Sports psychology, obviously maximizing the potentials of athletes, and that's cool. Okay, so I think that pretty much does it. Here's some more, same thing. These guys only break it down to 5. All right, so for this week, get your discussions in early. I will see you tonight and we continue this conversation. If there's any questions, get back to me. I have lots of papers to read. Thank you all for turning them in, and I hope to get them all done by Friday, hopefully. Crossing my fingers. Okay,